as we can call it in Iran, pays attention almost exclusively to the legitimacy of the public space in opposition to the political theology that is represented and expressed by the absolute sovereignty of the theocratic institution. In final analysis, I think that the question of legitimacy of the Iranian regime rests on the relationship of the state power to the consent of the governed and to what is deemed to be lawful. However, the Iranian understanding of the relations between the rulers and the people in the Islamic regime suggests that rulers must constantly seek popular approval, not by way of expressed public opinions, but through winning the hearts and minds of the Iranian people. Even at critical times, like the war against Iraq, this moral and political legitimacy tipped the balance between hope and belief, or at least gave somebody like Ayatollah Khomeini at that time the foothold he needed to build the stability and security for the Iranian regime. This is no more there. Today, I think, the equation between charismatic moral capital and institutional moral capital is widely absent in the Iranian political system, and the second life of the Islamic Republic from the 1990s onwards opened up a credibility gap in the political life of the Islamic regime and initiated a long-term mistrust of the political institutions and the principle of theocratic sovereignty. So the crisis of legitimacy that is often said to have afflicted the Iranian political system and its various institutions was, to put it rather grandly, a moral crisis of the Iranian Revolution itself. A moral crisis of the Iranian Revolution itself. Iran had emerged from its revolution in 1979 with its faith in its own goodness, which was reaffirmed by the defeat of the Shah as a tyrant and the war against Saddam, but the heroic stamp and the revolutionary fervor steadily gave way to disillusionment and cynicism. Free spheres of dissent and dissent discourse mainly have thrived in post-revolutionary Iran. They include women, they include the youth, and they include the intellectuals. And these free spheres of dissent have embodied each deliberate and conscious forms of resistance of the public sphere against absolute sovereignty of the Iranian political system. So it goes without saying that the Iranian civil society has been quite vibrant and path-making despite the theocratic sovereignty in Iran, and the Iranian public space is faced with the problem of combining a rejection of absolute violence with the need to put faith in nonviolent action. And so, to conclude on this, of course, I think resides in the self-organization, as Andrew was saying, the self-organization of Iranian civil society that defines the violence embodied in the Iranian state and its instruments of control and domination, but it's also closely related to a new ethical standards against which Iranian political reality could be measured. By assuming an ethical stance in the Iranian civil society, it can make a stronger political case, I think. Because in a violent political society like Iran, in which most of the ethical values have been largely discarded, the notion of nonviolent action needs once again to be highlighted, and this is my point. And this is why I talk about the Gandhian moment in Iran, because I think that this nonviolent paradigm is still in the making in Iran, and this is due to the fact that the protest movement in Iran is nonviolent and civil in its methods of creating social change, while also seeking an ethical dimension to political Iranian politics. So this Gandhian movement exemplifies the other possibility of politics in Iran as living with ethics ahead of power relations, and this is actually very, very important. I do believe, to end up my presentation, I do believe that nonviolence in today's Iran is actually what you have called the politics of resistance at this conference, but also it's the pragmatic, because don't come back to me and see it's very realistic. It's a pragmatic and the practical wisdom of Iranian civic actors. Because to be nonviolent is not only to say no to the government, and it's not just to disobey, but it's also a way of actually making the future of Iran in other words. I mean, in other words, what I'm saying is that the Gandhian moment in Iranian civic movement would be not to turn our eyes away from naked violence or to respond to it with another form of violence, but to transform the eventfulness of this naked violence coming from the Iranian state into its opposite with an instrument of ethical action. And this is an imperative that commands us to fight against the culture and politics of violence in Iran to the best of our ability. As such, I would say only a passion for truth and nonviolence could save Iranian civic movement from developing it into a passive entity or a violent structure. And it is true that violence is a reaction to a situation which becomes intolerable like it is today in Iran, but it is also true that even the intolerable is a moral tightrope on which we need to learn to walk. Thank you very much.